Hello everyone, it's Crafty Josephine here. Today I'm going to show you how I make my buffalo plaid gnome holding a fabric pumpkin. Of course, if buffalo plaid isn't really your thing, you could pick any print fabric that you like, or maybe even a solid colored fabric. That'd be just perfect for fall.
Alright, so let's get started. This gnome is a little bit different than my scarecrow gnome in that it's a little bit taller and a little bit wider. This one's going to have a 4-inch circle base, and then the quarter circle that helps make up that cone is going to be a little bit taller too. I will put a link for my blog and the free patterns that you can get. Just going to go ahead and trace. This is not my best Sharpie marker. Let me try a different one. Alright, so now I can get both of these pieces cut out. So now that I have the pieces cut out for the gnome's body, I'm going to now cut out, trace the patterns first for the gnome's hat, the pumpkin he's going to be holding, and his arm. And so I'm going to trace the patterns onto the back of my fabric, but I just folded it over so you could see that we're going with the buffalo plaid. And I'll need 2 of the hats, one for the front and one for the back. So I like to trace my patterns on the cardboard whenever possible because that's easier for tracing, but I have this one on paper, so that's a little trickier for tracing. That's the hat. Then I need 2 arms. And this one is on cardboard, so that'll be nice. Alright. And then the last one I need is for the fabric pumpkin. And so I will put that over here. And then I just need to cut these pieces out now. So I have pinned my cone pieces together to make my gnome body, and I'm just going to go ahead and start sewing. And just like the scarecrow, you know, it's a little tricky sometimes to do these circular bases. Get the light turned on there. But once you get used to it, it's not so bad. And I actually think that felt is a little bit easier to work with when you're sewing in a circle like this than some of the other fabrics, because it's just more obvious if you're starting to sew on a crease. And as you remove your pins, you can kind of pull at that fabric a little bit to make sure that you don't sew any wrinkles down. Okay, so the next piece I'm going to work on is the hat. And so I have 2 of these pieces, and what I'm going to do is I just folded under, I would say about 1/4 inch, the bottom of that fabric and pinned it down. And I'm just going to stitch that so that we have a nice edge there that we're working with at the bottom of his hat. Show you how I did that with this one. And the nice thing with these striped fabrics or plaid is that you have lines that you can work with to help keep you on track. So now that both of those have that edge sewn under, I'm going to put my right sides together. And I'm going to sew the sides together. Turn that around. Alright, so that's done. And now we have the arms. So I mentioned this in the Scarecrow Gnome, and I'll mention it again here. So often what I do is, like we did with the hat, I'll often sew this edge under here. All depending on the gnome, sometimes I like it to be a little bit scruffier looking. I think I'll go ahead and sew it under this time. I didn't do it with the Scarecrow because I do like kind of scruffy arms on the Scarecrow, but I'll play it a little neater this time. And then once you sew that edge down, you can go ahead and sew the arm closed. So you can see I did it to this edge, and this is where his little pom-pom hand is going to go. I didn't do it to this edge, and the reason for that is that will get tucked under later, and then it's usually hidden when it's on the body, so it doesn't need to look as nice as this one, which can be seen. You'll see it, you know, the gnome will be holding the pumpkin, and you'll see that sleeve edge right there. So that's why I only did one end. Alright, so I've got all the pieces cut out for the hat and the two arms and the pumpkin, and now I'm just going to start getting off all these extra threads, turning things right side out. I usually cut very close to the point without going into the seam here, because when you turn it inside out, that point is so tiny that it's going to be very hard to turn it inside out if you don't cut close to the seams there. And because the arms are so small, they're a little bit trickier to turn inside out. So I'm going to use a pencil to do those, but the hat's not too bad. I think I'll use the pencil now to get this as far as I can get it. And then what I usually do to get just a little bit closer to that point there is I'll actually use either a pin or a needle to kind of just grab some of that fabric that's caught in the point and pull it out. That's pretty close to good for me. So like I said, turning the arms inside out are a little tricky, but if you can get it going with your fingers, just a little bit, and then just use the eraser side of a pencil, it goes a lot faster. See? Much better. Go. So I have the gnome body here, and I'll cut my tails. And this is a little helpful tip that I try to remember when I'm working, is that sometimes I like to just leave those tails pretty long on purpose, because I know that I'm going to have to hand sew up this opening that I left for stuffing the gnome, and I'm going to need that thread, so I often leave that tail on and I leave it pretty long so that when I'm ready to stuff, I have that thread right there and I don't have to go back, find my thread. And I just cut real close to the point without cutting into it. Just part of my tails there. Hope you can see that okay. Then I go ahead and turn that inside out. Okay, so I'm going to be, moment of truth here, right? I'm going to be real honest. So to keep it from bunching up a lot on the inside, you can cut little triangles in here. I'll cut a couple. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't usually do it. Again, if this was a garment I was going to wear and I was worried about that extra fabric bunching up, then I would go ahead and, you know, go around and do that. But this is just for a gnome, and they look perfectly cute without all that being done. So if you like to do that, go for it. I'm not going to. I rarely do for the gnome body. There we go. Now we can do some stuffing. Alright, I've got my stuffing and I'm ready to start filling up the gnome body. And I like to just pull apart. This is the premium fiber fill that I get at JoAnn's. I just like to pull it apart. If you just start stuffing it in there, you'll find that often it looks very lumpy. It's not as noticeable with felt because that's pretty thick and you may not notice how lumpy it looks. But later on when we go to stuff the hat a little bit, this will make a difference in making the stuffing look nice and smooth and not leaving lumps in your gnome. Alright, so we're getting to the point where I want to add my rice bag at the bottom. So this is just a Ziploc bag, sandwich bag size, that I put, I would say about a third cup. I don't measure it exactly, but it's probably about a third cup of rice in there. Not cooked. And this is just going to be the weight of my gnome. And then I just have a lot of extra after I used a rubber band to kind of close it up there. So I'm just going to cut that off so it's not quite so bulky. And then, of course, you want it to be pretty close to round because it's going on the bottom of the gnome. You could use beans, you could use plastic pellets, probably use sand in a baggie. So I get that in the bottom. It doesn't need to be very heavy, it's just enough to, you know, keep the gnome from falling over. This way you can kind of knock him around a little bit and he's still going to stay upright. And once I get that in, then I can fill just the little bit of gaps that's left with stuffing. Okay, so I've finished stuffing the gnome, and what I've done is I've threaded my needle and tied it in a knot, and now I'm going to use the ladder stitch to close up the bottom of the gnome here. I'm going to try to hide my knot down in there. Let me bring this a little closer. I don't know if this will show up on camera. So you have your two edges folded down inside. Come up on one side, you go down on the other, and I would say come up maybe about 1/4 inch. Come up through that side. Now you're back over to the other side, and this is basically just trying to make this seam that you're creating to be as invisible as possible. So sliding through about 1/4 inch, coming up, going down the other side. Didn't help if I'm off camera, huh? Down the other side, over about 1/4 inch. So I've taken my pin out, which I don't recommend you do, but I did it so that hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing here a little bit better. Alright, so you can see which side I have my thread on, and I'm crossing over to the other side, going through about 1/4 inch and pulling through. So my stitches need to be tightened here some more. It's hard because the lighting, I can tell, is a little bit hard to see. Alright, see if I turn it this way. Oh, that's a little better, I think. So it's on the right hand side. I'm going to cross over to the left hand side. Put the needle through about 1/4 inch. Pull through. Now I come back over to the right hand side. Go about 1/4 inch, and I'm pretty close to the top now, so I'm just going to go ahead, go over, and now I can just knot up my thread here. And I usually use the scissors just to try to push that knot down in there. So my ladder stitches are definitely not my best work. But here's the good news about it. It's all going to get hidden by the beard anyways, so as long as it's doing its job of keeping the fiber fill in there, that's okay. Because the beard's going to go on top, and then we won't even see that. Alright, so now I'm going to start gathering my pumpkin. And what I want to do is just turn over this edge a little bit. And again, use the lines on your buffalo check here to help you keep it consistent. And I'm just folding it all under just a little bit. You can pin it if you want to, but like I said, I'm going to eye it by looking at those lines on my buffalo check there. And I've knotted my thread already. It's doubled up. And I'm just going to go ahead and start at the seam here, and I want to be pretty close to the edge. So when you gather, it's actually a pretty easy stitch, you know, it's just up and down. Again, I would say maybe 1/4 inch apart. And see how I'm just following? I'm making sure to keep the fold on this line from my buffalo plaid there, And I'm just following the line from the plaid to make life easy on myself. That way I don't even have to worry about fighting pins while I'm doing this. Just keeping it folded. Up, down. Get that pin out of there. Don't need that anymore. If you wanted to, you could always press it under so that it'll stay folded easier. If you feel like you're fighting the fabric too much while you're trying to gather, that's always an option. Okay, and now I'm back near the beginning here at my seam. Go ahead and pull it through to the inside of the pumpkin. Now you want to gather it as tight as you can, like so. And go ahead and knot it. Alright. Now we're going to stuff the pumpkin. Back to our stuffing technique of trying to get the lumps out of the fiberfill. A little bit more. Maybe a little more. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing to the top. Folding just a little bit under. Of course, now we have to fight with the stuffing, so there is that. But at least you still have those lines from the buffalo plaid that you can work with. I'm going to start again at the seam. I'm just going to follow that line. Alright, and then once you get it all around in the beginning again, you can just go ahead and pull on that thread as tight as you can and knot it off. Alright, so we have our pumpkin there. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my pumpkin with embroidery floss. You probably could just leave it like this if you wanted to, but I think this next step makes it extra pumpkin-y. And so what I'm going to do is wrap it once, and just going around the middle like that. And I guess you could think of it as being wrapped at, say, if we're looking at the hands of a clock, we've got it wrapped so far at 3 and 9. I've got my threads, they're crossing across each other, and I'm going to divide this pumpkin into 6 sections, so then wrap there, it over, once I have it pretty close to the way I want it. Make sure to pull tight. You'll have some freedom to move them if the spacings aren't quite how you like them after, but you won't want to move them a whole lot, so just a little back and forth. So try to get most of it done before you tie the knot. And of course you want it to be nice and tight. Have an extra pair of hands around to help you tie the knot. That's always helpful, but I'm going to try to do it on my own here. I think I got it. Oh, look at that. Alright, I think we got it. And then knot it one more time after that to really hold it in place. So like I said, the pumpkin has like 6 divisions there. And try to space them evenly as you can, but you can move the threads a little bit. And you could use also, if you didn't want to use embroidery floss, you could also, if you wanted to make it look a little more rustic, you could use twine. I've done that before. Okay, so now I'm going to make the stem for my pumpkin. And I've decided to go with black for the stem to kind of go with the buffalo plaid, but obviously you can do whatever color you want. So I just cut a rectangle roughly out of felt, and it's about 1 inch by 2 inches long. And I'm just going to roll that up and I'm going to hot glue it. And shut and hopefully not burn myself in the process. I think I got it. So it's kind of like a tube. But what I want is for mine to bend a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little dab of glue right in the middle. Just a little bit. And I'm going to fold. That's going to take a little bit longer to dry because it's just catching a little bit of itself to stay bent like that. And then I'll be attaching that to the top there. If you don't like the look of the stem bent, you could obviously, I would say for this size pumpkin, go a little bit smaller. Maybe just do a 1/2 inch tall and do a short little stem. I kind of like them bent over. I think that makes them kind of cute. I think it's finally starting to stay. So I'll go ahead. Just put a little bit of glue on the bottom here. I've seen people do other things when they make their fabric pumpkins. Some people will use just like a little piece of stick from the yard. That's pretty cute, especially if you're going for like a rustic theme. You could make the stem out of clay. If you have a lot of artificial flowers, you could probably cut off maybe a piece of the stem from that and use that. So, not bad. I think I'll just clean the edge of this up a little bit. There we go. I like it. Alright. Alright, so now I'm ready to cut the fur that will be the beard for my gnome. And I have this fur. This is probably my all-time favorite fur, and I'm getting sad because I'm running out of it, and I don't even remember now where I got it from. I got it so long ago. But anyways, it's kind of like a grayish color, but it's got like the black on the tips there. I don't know, it's so cute. It just looks really great with this gnome. So I don't have a pattern for my beards, but I'll give you a general idea. So that's roughly the shape that I use. I have this excess at the top that I won't need, and I'll cut that off too. I just cut my fur on the back to try to minimize the mess. I suggest using a sharper X-Acto knife than mine. I definitely need to get a new blade. And always cut away from your fingers. Comparing my pieces. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and glue that on. You can see I was kind of just trying the hat on my gnome. I haven't attached that permanently yet. But I just kind of wanted to see where it was going to hit in comparison to my beard. And I'm going to glue the bottom part of the beard on. You could glue the top on now too if you want. The reason I'm not going to do the top part is because I'm going to stitch this hat on with white thread. And when I do that, I'm also going to catch some of the beard. And I don't want to have to try to sew through glue up here at the top, so I don't put glue up there. It'll just get caught in the hand sewing. Alright. Alright, so the next step I'm going to do is go ahead and insert pom-poms as the hands for my little gnome here. And I could sew these in. I'm not going to. I'm just going to use a little dab of glue. Like so. I'll do the same to the other one. Some strings hanging out here. Trick is always not to sew or glue the sleeves shut without getting the hand in there first. And then just lightly, without burning yourself, get that little gnome hand in. Alright, and then once those are in, so I go back and forth on how much stuffing, or if I put any stuffing at all, into the arms, because I think they look pretty cute if they're just floppy. I don't think they need to be real puffy arms. But lately I've been putting at least a little bit of stuffing in. But you kind of just do it how you prefer. If you like your arms really stuffed, or if you like them without any stuffing at all, or somewhere in between. His arms will have to curve just a little bit around his body when he holds the pumpkin. So I would just say make sure to leave enough room so that they can kind of make that curve without fighting too much. I will be putting the arms underneath there and then stitching that down. So I'm not going to stuff all the way to the top of the arm. I'm going to leave that part for sure where I can just easily flatten it against his body. Again, the pencil comes in real handy for getting the stuffing in. All those places that it's hard to reach with your finger. You can maybe just a little bit more. So what I can do is I'll use a pin. Figure out where I want that arm. I just always put it so that the seam part from where I sewed it is down. And then I want to make sure that my hat is going to cover. So then I will just pin that right there. While I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and stuff his hat And this one fits pretty close to his body. That's why I make my gnomes comb shape, so that I don't have to add a lot of extra stuffing to their hats. So I won't need a lot of stuffing, just a little bit really for the top. You can see there. And then maybe just a little bit down here at the bottom, not much. So, and I'll just be working with that as I stitch the hat down, adding more as I go. Alright, so I'm going to get to hand stitching the hat and the arms on now. I've already gone down underneath the arm and come up through it, and now I want to catch the hat. And I just wanted to mention, since I'm hand stitching it, I'm using white thread, and as you can see my fabric is black and white. So when I come up and grab the hat, I'm either going to try to hit these white spots, these squares here, or at least get the ones that have the black and white in them, so that hopefully my hand sewn stitches won't show as much. And I'm going to be making nice teeny tiny stitches because I don't really want them to show. And trying to stick to the white spots so that my thread will be disguised. Very small stitches. Got a pencil that wishes it was a gnome. I'm getting to the point where I want to add my other arm. And you can take this time too to add more stuffing in between the hat and the gnome body. Here again, I'm trying to keep that seam down. Now you could either get out a ruler if you wanted to, but I just like to eyeball and kind of look at him and see if his arms look about the same length. To me, I feel like this side here looks just a little bit shorter, so I might just try to pull that down just a little bit. I think that looks good. So I'm just going to keep going and keep hand stitching. And I started here with this arm, so that's where I'm going to end too. Come up, connect my thread. I mentioned earlier that this is my slightly bigger gnome with the 4-inch base, and he's a little bit taller than the Scarecrow Gnome too. So I'm going to use my larger gnome nose, and this one is a 3/4 inch ball. And I'll just glue that on real fast. And then all that I have left to do here is to hand sew the pumpkin. Alright, so we're on to the last step, and that is to hand sew the pumpkin into the gnome's hands. You could use glue too. I've certainly glued things to the gnome's hands. But I don't know why. I prefer, usually when I can, to hand stitch it, all depending on what the item is. So I just knotted my thread, and I kind of got down in there in the seam real close to the edge. And again, kind of like I did with my hat, since I'm using the white thread, I'm going to try to catch only the white spots of the pumpkin here, so that the thread won't stand out so much that it's hand sewn on. Also, another thing I usually like to try to do is kind of find the ugly side of my pumpkin, whatever side that might be, and kind of try to hide that, so that, you know, best foot forward, best side of the pumpkin forward. So I think I like it. I think I like it like this. I might fix my stem a little bit later. And then, you know, decide where you want the hand of the pumpkin, or the hand to touch the pumpkin. So I'm going to say right about there. Just little stitches. And you don't need a bunch. Obviously the pumpkin is not very heavy, so it's not anything you have to worry about coming undone unless it's going to get yanked on. So, you know, maybe 2 or 3 stitches to keep it on there should be plenty. Alright, make my knot again. Through the sleeve. You know, I want to try to make everything pretty even, so I'm going to try to figure out about how high up he was holding the pumpkin on the right side, so I can have him hold it about the same height on the left side. Trying to go through the white spot with my white thread. Alright, there he is. Of course, there's always stray pieces of fiberfill and beard that I have to clean off. Okay.
Alright, well that is all I have for the fabric pumpkin gnome. I know that some of that video footage could have been better, so if you hung in there with me through all of it, I really appreciate it. I promise to continue working on improving my filming abilities. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy this video and want to see more, please like and subscribe. Have a great day.